But you need to go beyond the bait they've given you to choose their idea. In certain assessment centres I've been in, they really wanted to go forward with something that did not make sense, and they really wanted me to concede. How we handled not progressing, how we handle that in a team. Some people may get very upset. Some people may blame people for not going very far. Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. If you guys are new, my name is Temi. I make videos on careers, education and tech. I also give advice on how to leave uni with more than a degree and how to get you somewhere you actually want to be. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing some important do's and don'ts for virtual assessment centres. I've given advice to a bunch of you guys and also asked you guys questions on what was hardest about the assessment centre, what was the easiest part of the assessment centre, what would you watch out for next time, and what advice would you give to someone who's about to take their assessment centre? How many times can I say assessment centre in one sentence? So a big thank you and shout out to Dominic, who actually was successful in passing his assessment centre in April, I think around April time. I'm going to be sharing his experience and also coupling that with important do's and don'ts for your virtual assessment centre. This assessment centre was done via Teams, so you usually have to log on for maybe 9 a.m. It's advised that you log on obviously earlier than 9 a.m. and also check that you're able to access Teams, you know how it works, the day before or prior to the assessment centre, and making sure you reach out to the careers or recruitment team before the day if you have any technical issues. This particular assessment centre lasted from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. and they had the opportunity to take lots of breaks, but you are being watched the whole time. So if you are comfortable and you feel like you can go without a break, you can also just participate and in conversation, discussion. That actually gives the assessors, if they're still there, if they're still watching you, which they may be, some more context, I guess, for you to know more about you essentially. And it also shows enthusiasm if you keep the conversation going, ask about people's experiences, ask about where they're from, and try and be friendly. This assessment centre had 4 tasks. The first one was an escape room, which I haven't quite come across yet, working in a team of 4 to basically solve a puzzle using clues. So Dominic said it was a really good icebreaker. It just sort of got the creative juices flowing. The second task was an individual task in which they had to select 2 projects to basically go forward with. So this is really common in assessment centres, where you're given a list of sort of directions that the business could go in, and usually this is in the form of projects. So which projects are going to give you the business the most value at this current time, or what projects would you park, what projects would you postpone, that sort of thing. So you have to make your case and then join a team or the team that you were in before, and just make your case as to why the projects you've selected are the best. The best way to do this is to go off of the information that you've been given. So usually you get some data, you might get some statistics, and to the best of your ability, try and deduce what is going to give the business the best value or going to deliver the best returns at that time, if it's specific to that time, or if the project is going to be implemented immediately. So Dominic's actually given quite an interesting piece of advice, which is what I've also mentioned as well previously on my channel, is that this task is designed for you to showcase that you're able to put your ideas forward without overpowering other people, but also be in a position to listen to other people and defend your idea, think intellectually, and genuinely admit when you've been persuaded or admit when you've been out argued essentially. So it's sort of a mixture of 2 skills there. So if you're too much of a pushover, you might get none of your projects selected. For me, I always wanted to try and get 1 project selected out of the 2. That if I had 2 to choose, I would try and get 1 selected, or hopefully just pray that someone else agrees with me, because that shows that you've defended your idea. You don't want to be in a position where none of your projects get selected really, or if you are and you're heavily out argued in terms of logical points that support other projects or other ideas, then it's best to concede, but using terminology that shows that you understand why their ideas or alternative ideas are better than the ones you chose. So you have to admit to that. You can't let anyone else do that for you. So a good way of doing that is saying, so someone says, oh, I actually think, the return on investment of this idea is better than the one that you've chosen, just because this is a global project and that one is just specific to the US region. A good way to concede, if that's what we can call it, is to say, oh, okay, I do see where you're coming from. So I've just had another look at the map, and that seems like a really valid point. It also shows that possibly if we did do this project and do it globally, it also means that we can capitalize off of the knowledge in different regions or in different headquarters in different continents. We could, extend our reach even to, I'm just literally spouting rubbish right now, but you need to go beyond the bait they've given you to choose their idea. You need to now say, okay, I understand, that makes a lot of sense, but even going further than that, we can choose this idea and this and this reason validates this further. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. And that's an excellent way to concede if none of your ideas get chosen without seeming like a pushover or seeming like you can't defend your ideas. So concede whilst adding value to the argument. I think that's what I'm trying to say. So those were sort of two tasks in one. The last task was an individual task, and it was giving a short presentation to an assessor. So role playing and basically stating which ideas this company should use, essentially. So basically talking to a manager or a director. So these guys are only given 10 minutes to prepare, which I think is pretty mean, but if it's the same projects that they were working on all day, that's completely understandable. So then they gave the presentation, and then the assessors asked the candidates questions after that. I almost fell into a huge trap. I actually did a very similar assessment centre. Essentially what they were expecting is that you went forward with what you had chosen in your team. That might seem really obvious, but at the time, if you didn't agree with your team decision, like really and truly you didn't agree with it, even with all the facts that presented, technically you can change your mind and present something different to the manager or director or the assessor. However, they are expecting you to support your team decision and not just go down your own path. Even though it is an assessment centre and it's not real, they're still expecting you to go forward with the decision you made earlier in your team. And they basically asked you about why you chose this route, and sometimes they may actually try and convince you otherwise. Stick your ground, because you have to be aware of the fact that technically you know more than them. And it's not to say that you're smarter than them. Obviously you're not smarter than them. They're managers and they're directors, they know a lot. But in this role play situation, they're a manager. They have to oversee so many different things. They don't get the luxury, or I wouldn't say it's a luxury, the burden of understanding every single project in detail. They are trusting teams below them to come up with strategy, to come up with projects, to go forward with things and present to them the result of all of that screening. So they don't have the burden of understanding all the details, all the information. So if they turn around and say, I don't really like the sound of that, it's your job to convince them otherwise using data. Data is the most effective way to do that. Saying back to them the data you've been given by them is the best way to do that. But also showing respect in this intellectual banter, not necessarily banter, but this intellectual debate. In certain assessment centres I've been in, they really wanted to go forward with something that did not make sense, and they really wanted me to concede. And I said, you know what, this is not what the data shows, and I highly advise against you going down this route. However, if you did want to go down this route, I would suggest highlighting this, this and this, and possibly pulling up, finding data on this specific thing or specific variable. I gave options. So I said, this is the best one. This is the best one. However, if you did want to go down the route that you're proposing, which basically has no data, I would advise you get this kind of data to back up your argument. Giving alternatives, essentially, to suit managers, because sometimes they see something one way, and it may be a combination of experiences of why they see something a certain way. They got a chance to speak to grads during the break. I would definitely use this opportunity to ask more about the role, ask more about the company, ask more about the business, and it just shows enthusiasm as well. Dominic said the hardest task was the written task, and I can completely concur on this. A lot of people say the interviews are hardest. I find personally the interviews the easiest. If you guys want interview tips that actually work, do let me know. I've been told after the assessment centre that that aspect of my interview was the strongest. So Dominic said the easiest part he felt was the group exercises, which is, I would say for me, it's sort of similar, not necessarily the easiest, but it comes after the interview in terms of being the next easiest. And he said he enjoyed the group exercises because everyone else was slightly timid, and that meant that he could, showcase how confident he was in the group. You can do this a number of ways. I share a number of ways you can do this in my assessment center video. Leading the group, it's a very good role to take if no one wants to take it. However, it does become hard if everyone wants to take the leadership role. But in this case, if no one's taking it, just take it. Finally, what advice would you give to other people who are nervous about the upcoming assessment center or just want to know more about what they're about, etc., etc.? So he said you could really tell that the assessment center was evaluating the candidates as people and not necessarily them technically. And that's something I think people forget, is that you've gotten this far and they genuinely think that you're a solid candidate for the role. It's just now, do you fit into the company culture? Do you gel with the company culture? Do your values, match ours? So they're just evaluating you as a person. Other advice is to act friendly, be friendly. If you are very introverted or very quiet, try and speak more. I made a video about that as well. I can actually do this now because I've got a few videos on the channel now. Also, one thing that I really wanted to mention to you guys is assessment centers are a chance for the company to learn more about you, but it's also a really good chance for you to learn more about the company. So a lot of the time you might find that they're actually also trying to impress you, tell you about the salary, tell you about the benefits, tell you about the facilities, or maybe not so much anymore, tell you about all the benefits of the company at the assessment centre, because it's a two-way interview, more on their part, but also for you as well. So they will also try and sell you the company, and you don't always have to accept it if you've got other options. You can actually also learn things through the assessment center. So you might actually learn tips and tricks and techniques to use in other assessment centers that you might be doing, which is really going to help you to succeed there if you weren't successful in the one that you did. They usually do give you very, very detailed feedback. It usually is the only stage of the whole application process that you actually get feedback on. Feedback before this stage may have been automated. So take the feedback very, very seriously. I actually always write out everything they said to make sure that I improve on areas, to give better examples in future, or just general things that they're saying. And also what I've noticed and what I tend to keep hearing and what personally I've experienced is it's not necessarily what you say. I've said a lot of trash before in an assessment centre. Not trash, but just things that didn't really make sense after I thought back, but why did I justify that in that way? That doesn't make sense. But it's not necessarily what you say, it's sort of how you're saying things and your thought process and how you're going through stages to get to a certain conclusion. I did a group task and we didn't get very far at all in our task, and it didn't matter. We literally went through like 2 stages of like 10, and it didn't matter that we didn't get that far, but they were looking at how we were doing it, how we were approaching it, how we handled not progressing, how we handled that in a team. Some people may get very upset, some people may blame people for not going very far. So not necessarily what, but how. So always remember that. And also another good point for virtual interviews is because everything is online, you might have to be more expressive and speak louder and just be more expressive, I guess, with hands and facial expressions than you would normally be, because it's obviously through a screen. That element of human interaction and body language is reduced, so you might have to overdo it just a little bit so that they can see your enthusiasm. I hope this has helped, guys. Thank you so much to Dominic for sharing his experience and allowing us to learn from it. So if you guys have your upcoming assessment centre psychometric tests, video interviews, do comment down below and let me know which part of the whole assessment process are you the most worried about or the most scared about. Do like, comment, share, subscribe if you like this video, and make sure you stick around on the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.